I mean, what we really talk about now is gentrification, which is a phenomenon, a gradual phenomenon that began. You could really accurately trace it by looking at the formation of the resident action groups, their formation, and when they were formed is a pretty good sign of the movement, which was gradual from the 60s, building up through the 70s and 80s in the inner suburbs. And for example, the first resident action group of that nature was the Paddington Society, I think it was called, in 1964. Then you had the Balmain Association in 1965, the Glebe Society in 1969, the Annandale Association in 1970. So it's a gradual movement in, and it's a slow build up of that. So accompanying that is a renovation of housing, and in the process, I mean, a feature of all the inner suburbs was rent control, which was imposed during the Second World War because of housing shortages, and there was something like about 12 or 1300 houses in Glebe that were rent controlled. So there was that gradual process of decontrolling them from the late 60s on, and once they were decontrolled, they could then kick the tenants out. So that opened up the market for movement in of new people that would buy up the property, and the expulsion of working class people that had lived here for a long time. And so I mean, the whole phenomenon of gentrification is a very gradual one. It's the building up. Then that's that movement in of people, and accompanying that is the whole infrastructure of consumption, where Glebe Road had always very modest shops that served local needs. You've got a gradual movement and a build-up from the 70s of restaurants along Glebe Road, hitting a peak of about 35 in the early 80s. And that's all part of that consumption. More bookshops, more art galleries, more music shops, things that are catering for the new middle class. And I mean, that same phenomenon is being repeated elsewhere in the others, and the inevitable hike in rentals and house prices, and inevitably the expulsion of lower income people. Glebe is a little different to other places in that you have got the Glebe estate, which was acquired in '74 by the Whitlam government as part of a conscious effort to retain low-income people in the inner city. They undertook a lot of restoration of those houses. There's about 750 houses on the Glebe estate, and unfortunately, when after Whitlam was dismissed in '65 and Fraser came in, they didn't have that same sort of commitment. So it was a long time before that restoration work was continued. And then eventually in 1985, the whole of the Glebe estate was transferred to the New South Wales Department of Housing. So from originally, when Whitlam acquired it in '74, it had been a sort of the home of from pretty well the beginning of the respectable working class, and the sort of composition of working class people after the Department of Housing acquired in '79 sort of changed quite a lot.